How were your holidays? Yeah,
The holidays were, so I flew a bit too close to the sun because it's been a very quiet like last year for me. And of course, the holidays, a lot of people in The Hague are international, so they all leave. So then you tend to find you'll send out messages to all your friends, okay, who's staying in The Hague for the holidays? And then so you become this little team of not orphans, but orphans, right? And then it's like, hey, do you want to go to the Christmas market? Hey, do you want to go rock climbing? Hey, do you want to do this? And so you kind of get this team that you don't normally hang out with. And it's so fun, right? And nobody has work. And so you're just doing all these cool things. But I socialized too much based on what I had been used to. And so after
right.
like 4 or 5 days of this, I just crashed. I was like, I socialized too much. I can't do this anymore. So I had
Too
to take a
much
3 day
work.
break and then I could get back to it. But otherwise it was super nice, really relaxed and
Oh, that's good.
fun to,
That's
yeah.
good. I'm always
So,
so happy when it's like over. Like,
yes.
you
Yeah.
know, because, in the Netherlands, obviously we have Sinterklaas, then we
Hmm.
have Christmas
Yeah.
with
No, first
family,
Christmas. Yeah.
and then is it first Christmas?
Well, eerste Kerstdag and second Kerstdag.
No,
Yeah.
Sinterklaas. I mean, yeah,
Oh, so, yeah, but Sinterklaas and then first and second
yeah,
Christmas.
first and second Christmas Day, and
Yeah.
then and my son's birthday is at the time. My sister's birthday
Oh, wow.
is also there in the mix, and then there's obviously New Year's Eve, which creates a lot of tension with my kids because something special needs to happen.
Yes.
Oh, and it's like, oh, I'm so happy it's over. It's like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so like we're done. Okay, done, ready.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a good time with the family, and obviously it's always good with my kids, and it's
Of
okay. But
course.
I'm
But it is a
so
lot. Yeah.
it's a lot.
It is a
Yes,
lot. It's one of the
yes,
advantages of, for
yeah,
me, staying in the Netherlands is
yeah,
not all this, no
yeah,
pressure for the big Christmas Eve dinners and
yeah.
yeah. I stayed home for New Year's Eve. It was so nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just by
I
myself.
I
Yeah.
used to go. I used to travel before I had kids. Sort of during Christmas and New Year's Eve, I would travel, go skiing somewhere or something. It was so great just to
Hmm.
be away. So like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not in the country. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Can't join next
Yeah.
time.
Anyway, all
Yeah.
right. Let's do the opening with Jim.
Okay, with Jim.
Callback.
Yes. Yeah, Jim Kalbach. What do we want to say? Um,
Jim is he is I really really like him as a person, as a creative, as a thinker, as but I like his energy. I like his vulnerability. I like the way he can jam,
hmm.
right?
Yes.
But also, you know, ending with, "Was this okay? Did
Yeah,
we
no,
go?"
this is
And
a great intro.
yeah, so yeah,
Oh,
no,
you mean
no,
with his question at the end of the interview,
yeah.
being like, "Yeah, was this okay?" Yeah.
Was this
Yeah.
okay? Was it a yeah? So Jim is, I've, I followed, his work, his books.
Hmm.
He wrote a lot of books covering things like journey mapping, but also jobs to be done, which
Hmm.
had a great influence on my work and my thinking. I've met him a couple of times. He's a musician. I'm a musician, and not as trained as he is, but I really resonates with me the way he kind of
Hmm.
connects his art, his music, his improv to the what we started calling the more linear business
Yeah.
world, and
Yeah.
that makes so much sense. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that conversation about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And because of course I had studied a lot of uncertainty in my master's and stuff, but I had never, and of course the metaphor of jazz came up, right? Being an improv jazz musician.
Right.
But when he compared it to classically trained musicians, which are trained to perfectly reproduce a written piece
Mhm.
versus then, jazz musicians who are on stage improving together,
Mhm.
that was a really interesting thing because they're both on the surface doing the same thing, right? Creating music. But the
Yeah,
whole entire approach and energy
yeah,
is so different. And there's different moments for different ones, right? You need classical music and you need jazz improv,
yeah. You
but
need
it's
both of
completely
those
different
mindsets.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah, you need both of the mindsets as well because together, you can do way more because
Hmm.
sometimes you need improv and sometimes you need sort of people who can really structure and make things repetitive and so you can kind of do it again. It's exactly the same way. In business,
Exactly.
often that is really important that you also are able to do that too, right?
Hmm.
So you need some linear thinking or in your business, but also sort of the chaos and the improv and the allowing for kind of things just to emerge and happen. And because there are rules in improv too, you listen to each other and you
Definitely.
kind of, so it makes so much sense. But why I think it's so meaningful to think about it this way is that human activities, whether it's making music, whether it's doing business, if you really look at it, it
Hmm.
follows similar patterns. Everything we do follows similar patterns. It's not so you can go like, "Wow, making music so much different than the things we do in business." But if you look at it, you go like, "No, it's exactly the same. It's
Yeah.
not different at all." And
Yeah.
so we are doing the same things, except that the outcome is different, or the result of music. That's you're making music. You're not, I don't know, building cars or making pizza. But the process of getting to that point is very similar. So you can learn so much. So so that's why if you learn if you learn a different skill, so if you're not a musician or if you
Hmm.
don't do if you're not in theater, if you don't paint, you know go and do it because
Yeah.
you will learn something about what you are actually doing as well, because it's not a waste of time at all. It's just that you take a different angle to learn about you and you as a human being and how you solve problems and how you go through life. So
Yeah.
I like that so much.
Yeah. And I had like this big insight because we were talking about uncertainty and the value and what's the secret or how can people become more comfortable with uncertainty? And he says something about, going out and trying arts or doing things. But I had kind of like this aha connection moment that is is there a connection between our own personal comfort zone and uncertainty? And is and it sounds so obvious when you think about it. Like, yeah, of course there's a connection, but I had never directly thought of it in that way. As like, I can with my comfort zone, if I'm brave enough to step out and do something outside of my comfort zone, right? I feel empowered. I feel happy that I tried it, or I'm happy I have a new experience.
Right.
But I never looked at it in terms of, hey, am I also increasing my capacity or comfort level with uncertainty? And for me, at least, most of the things that are outside of my comfort zone are there because there's a lot of uncertainty around them,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think if you know, in an odd way, I think if you're able to talk about it, meaning that you have language and words for it,
Hmm.
it that shapes also the way you think about it, and it and it you can make it more concrete or more tangible. Like because before that so this is when you say it sounds so obvious now I say it, but before you say it, it wasn't because it's sort of a feeling, it's vague, but because we can
Hmm.
talk about it, that's why I kind of people like Jim and other guests we had, they also give you language. You go like, there's we talk about the space in between, for instance. He talks about this as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
If you don't have the words for the space in between, where actually the things happen, where connections are being made between the different bubbles or whatever, you can't talk about it. It's not there. It doesn't exist. And it's really weird because if you think about it, like, no, of course it exists. You don't, no, it doesn't, because you didn't have a word for it. It didn't
Yeah.
exist. For you, it did not exist. It existed because you had words for it. Then all of a sudden it was there and you can do something with it. But so this is why language and, in design thinking and service design and UX, and it's a lot of language. right? And so when you
Hmm.
see new language emerge, it also means there's a new reality emerging, all right?
Yeah.
So we see that with AI right now, right? So because
Hmm.
we can, there's all these new words and this new language, but it's not just language, it's a new reality. And it's language that shapes it. So it's not just there's a new reality and so we have new words. No, it's new words and so we have a new reality.
Exactly. Exactly. And yeah. And how he said that the difference between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were stories. One were
Yeah, stories.
storytellers and
Yeah.
the others weren't.
Yeah, although I think they are finding out a lot more about Neanderthals, and they weren't that dumb. And actually, also
Okay.
turns out they didn't disappear. We just interbreeded, and we just kind of,
Oh,
yes, we are all part Neanderthal.
interesting.
Yes,
That doesn't surprise me, but
yes. It's never that simple.
true.
It wasn't that simple, and they didn't go anywhere. It's like you can tell with the DNA that, for instance, the Vikings
Hmm.
invaded the British Isles, right? And then or the Romans, and were there
Yeah.
too, and then they disappeared. No, they did not. No, they stayed there. They're still there. They married and they became English.
Hmm. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
became
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
British people. That's what they became. And they mixed and blended and all that. But in DNA, you can tell that in some towns, there's a lot of Viking DNA.
Yeah. Of
They didn't
course.
go
Of course.
anywhere, right? So
Yeah.
things are never what they seem.
No.
And I
No.
think that is, if we talk about ambiguity and allowing for that, if you're comfortable only when you have an answer and you want to have the answer, the answer, the truth, that is going to
Mm.
be, you're going to miss out on a lot of great stories because usually
Yes.
it's just the truth the way it is now. And then we find out new things. You go like, oh, wait a minute. Anyway, sorry, stop talking about Neanderthals. Um,
Neanderthals
yes,
and the
yeah.
nature of truth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and so learn about music, but also learn about history, learn about things, learn about other things than what is important for your job, because
Hmm.
you'll be able to connect back to those things. You can like, oh, wait a minute,
Yeah.
So I would advise as well, like you said, go paint, go play music,
Hmm.
go, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So, yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think his name's Jim Callback. We didn't say his full name, but his name's Jim Callback.
Jim Kalbach, and read his books and
Yeah, he's got a
follow
few out
him
there.
on LinkedIn. Yeah, he's someone you should follow. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely someone I want on my improv jazz jazz team. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah. Enjoy.
Yep.
Well, I'm Jim Caldback. Hopefully, I'm a cool person to talk to. I've written several books. It's five now, actually. I have a background in design and innovation. I worked in, product design teams, in the trenches, but I also did some consulting before coming to Mural. Been at Mural now 10 years, Arna, if you can believe
Oh,
that. I
really?
know. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
ten?
this is my 10th year at Mural. Yeah. And it's interesting to be at Mural because I'm not in a creative team myself, like per se now, although I stay abreast of, what's going on in the field, but I get to work with a lot of creative teams across industries. So I kind of have this helicopter view and I'm able to lend my advice to all different kinds of teams in manufacturing, small companies, large companies. So it's nice to have that overview and that kind of pulse on, what's going on these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of person are you? I mean, is it maybe an odd question, but sort of
Yeah.
is next to, your work and I mean, what are you because are you a creative or what kind of, how would you
Yeah, I
describe
would
it?
put myself in the creative bucket when and that, my background is coming from the creative fields, design thinking, obviously, but a lot of UX, CX work, things like that, journey mapping, which is the topic of one of my books. But when I came to Mural, I kind of moved to the go-to-market side of things, which was very new to me. And I actually headed up our customer success team for 5 years. So, which is a little bit more of the suit and tie type of person, right?
Hmm.
Working right next to salespeople, ring the bell and, partnerships and things like that. But I still consider myself a creative person next to the suits and ties.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And if somebody met you and they said, Jim, I've heard all about you professionally. I know your CV inside out, but who are you?
Who am I?
What would you say?
What would I say? That's a good question. I mean, if the first thing comes to mind is that I studied music and I play music a lot. I've tried to bring that into some of my professional work as well too. But I like to consider myself a musician as well. Pretty much a failed musician in the sense that I didn't, make that my career, amateur, whatever you want to say there. But that's a big part of my brain and my personality as well too.
Ooh,
But
yeah.
otherwise, I'm just a fun social person to be around, I think.
Let's see.
Yeah.
So
And do you think that music informs your work now and how you operate?
When I tell people, oh, yeah, I studied music and I have a master's degree in music theory and composition, and people are like, wow, that sounds like a complete change, right? Because on paper or when I say it, it feels like, wow, you just shifted 180 degrees, right? But in my mind, there is a logical connection there. And sometimes it's hard for me to articulate, but I've had this long, circuitous professional path. I kind of went around to different stations. And I think as human beings, you try to find patterns, right? And
Hmm.
similarities and crossovers and things like that. So from the inside, I've been able to think about that, the relationship, let's say, of, music, which is a creative field, right? I
Definitely.
studied
Yeah.
composition, right?
yeah,
Which has the very real problem of you have a challenge and your starting point is a blank piece of paper,
Hmm.
right? And then you got to fill it with notes. Well, guess what? In professional creative contexts, you're given a challenge and you start from a blank piece of paper, right? And design thinking, just as an example, is a great way to go from a blank piece of paper to something more concrete that's actually implementable or
yeah.
tangible, right? So I think just that the comfort and the embracing of starting from nothing, and there's no playbook for this song I'm about to write, or there's no playbook for this design sprint we're about to run, but you still know there are frameworks and guidelines and things that can get you there. You don't know the answer before you go into it, but you know how to get the answer, right?
I
And
listen.
that just that mindset, I think I've taken that through my whole career.
Yeah, but listen. So I play music. I play music my whole life. If I think, so I do a lot of facilitation. I've learned if I thought about this, a while ago. I thought, when did I start learning about facilitation? Because I didn't go to school. There's no such thing as a facilitation university or
Mhm,
something. I've
right.
never. So where did I start learning about facilitating a group of people going through a creative process? And a lot of my experience is by playing in a band,
Yeah.
especially with teenagers.
Oh,
Getting,
yeah.
everybody has their own speciality or their own role, being, a guitar or drums or bass or what have you, and then bringing them all together and
Oh, yeah.
creating one thing out of that. I think music, and to me, music is probably the one of the highest forms of art because it's the most mystical one, because
Yeah, totally.
you create like sound waves, invisible, and it is
That's
emotional. So there's all these,
Yeah.
to me, there's so many connections. It
yeah.
makes so much sense.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
I'm
So, I mean,
glad.
yeah, right. I mean, no, but so Morgan and I, we've been discussing this with other people and amongst ourselves as well, by the way, the
Uh-huh.
connection
Hmm.
between
Yeah.
art and design. Like, so,
Yeah.
maybe there's a reason why there's a difference, because if you are, in design, if you will, you have someone who asks you to design something, and you do it for them and not for yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas you could say, if you're an artist,
Yeah.
basically you design for you, it's your reflection, it's your, visualizing or shaping your reality and putting that into either whatever art form you have. It can be music, it can be painting, it can be anything.
Hmm.
But to me, the mindset, the way of thinking, starting with nothing and being able to kind of go and try something, Because if you write music, right,
Yeah.
you start with, trying, you can't go like, oh, I just thought up the perfect piece of music in my head
Right.
in one go. No, you start with sketching and trying,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Yeah. No, no, absolutely. And that's interesting. You brought that up too, because sometimes when I'm thinking about creating music, like original, compositions or whatever, I approach it like a design activity, right? And we say the word composition or writing a piece of music, but it's essentially a design activity, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
And you design sounds over time for human consumption. That's what I'm design. It's the medium is different, right? But it's
right.
the design of sound and silence over time so that a human can, perceive it. And, design is really, the organization or the composition, right? The composition of elements, whether it's digital or physical or whatever that is as well,
Yeah.
too. So, but, I think, going back to the original question, though, for me, those things are very related in terms of a mindset and in terms of internalization of what that means, right? And I think I bring that to the table, which sometimes when I'm more around suits, that like pisses them off because I'm always like, what if? What if we did this? What if we did that? And they're like, "Jim, we just execute, Jim." And I'm like, no, 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 no. I gotta explore. So I'm always exploring things. But yeah, I think my upbringing and studying music has totally informed my professional career in the creative space.
Is it
Yeah.
also true that if you are, if you are creating a piece of music, I mean, it's just I'm speaking from my own kind of experience, you know, but also trying to be an artist and and what have you. But when you're working on something, that is never the end. You never. I mean, you might finish the one thing, be it music or painting, whatever, but that kind of informs the next bit again. You're gonna
Totally.
you never it's not like, okay, I'm done, it's
Yep.
finished. No,
Yeah.
because there's a continuous activity. You're
Totally.
always designing the next. You're designing the next, right? So
Totally.
whereas in
Yeah.
in a more linear way of thinking, a more business like way of thinking,
Right.
you're finishing something and then you're
That's right.
done.
That's right. That's right. No,
But I think,
I agree. In my mind, nothing's ever done,
right.
right? Which is annoying in business contexts, right? That kind of thing. And take that thought one step further. When I was at university, I studied, classical composition, right, which was very controlled intentionally, which I love doing. But I also play jazz bass, and I've looked into improvisation
Yeah.
quite a bit, the inner workings of it, and I can do it too. So when we think about improvisation as the spontaneous design of sounds and silences over time, right? That gets even more nonlinear, right? Because
Mm.
you get a group of people on stage and you're like, what song do you want to play? Okay, we've never played together before and we don't know this song or we've never rehearsed this together, and then something really good comes out of it because you're doing it even spontaneously. That mindset is incredible, and I find that mindset also, I bring that mindset into my business world too. When you're working in a more corporate environment, there is a natural tendency to put everything in documentation and process. And I'm always like, nah, we don't need that. We can just jam, can't we? Right. Yeah. And you have your Wednesday jams, right? So
Yeah.
when I heard about your Wednesday jams, I'm like, this is great because I can get up on stage and jam just as good as anybody else. So that embracing uncertainty and curiosity and this idea of, yeah, we don't know what the output's going to be, but we know how to get there. Right. For me, that's kind of a jazz mindset.
Yeah, that's really cool. And when as an audience member, I can go to some performance and the people could be playing some very classical, measured, particular piece.
Mhm.
And I sit there and I can enjoy and absorb this performance. And I can also sit there and listen to an improv jazz performance. And sure, the vibes are different, but I don't necessarily know what's going through the performer's head
Hmm.
and the types of mindsets they have when they're doing these two different types of
That's
performance.
right.
I can guess, but how would you explain the difference in
Yeah.
mindsets when between
It
those two
yeah.
different types?
It's very, very different mindset. In fact, I was talking with my bandmates on Tuesday, just what's today? Thursday. Yeah, we just
Thursday, yeah.
rehearsed and we were talking about that. The notion that a lot of classically trained performers, so violinist in an orchestra, has played violin for 20 years, reading from music, Mozart, Beethoven, whatever it is. It's hard for them to improvise, right? Because they're just so used to getting the information fed to them. And they're great at doing it too. Like they can read a note that looks black, or a page that looks black with notes, and they'll just read it, no problem, right? I can't do that, right? But if you say, hey, here's a bunch of chords and count off a tempo, they're like, what should I play, right? So it's a very, very, very different mindset. The idea of embracing uncertainty and getting on stage and going, we don't know what we're going to play. Like that's a very, very different mindset than we're going to play this song and it's written down. And my friend Sarah B. Nelson, she's the chief design officer at Kyndryl, which was an IBM spinoff. She plays classical violin, but also knows about jazz, and she teaches design thinking. And she was at a talk, and somebody gave the metaphor of it was actually an orchestra conductor trying to teach a classically trained player to improvise. And she said, that's what I'm doing at work. Yeah. I'm trying to take documentation, process-oriented people and trying to take that and get them to do design thinking, which is a lot more improvisatory in nature, right? So that metaphor for her, that describes her purpose at the company is to get people into a different mindset. And it is a very, very different mindset. I think one of the key elements to answer your question a little more directly, Morgan, and I mentioned it too, is just this idea of uncertainty, right? That you really, really, really have to brace uncertainty. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but let's start and see where it goes, right? That if you have that mindset, it's an orientation to uncertainty. I believe there's probably some other things there too, but for me, it's about your position against uncertainty and how well you can embrace that.
Yeah. And have you always been, because I imagine if you did a master's in, composition and this wasn't your first year of music, right? It had been something on your radar for a long time. Have you always been someone who's more oriented towards uncertainty?
No, I don't think so. At least not in, no, well, let's see. That's an interesting question. You mean in general or in music?
Yeah.
In general? No, it's really weird because it depends on the domain and the topic. Like with finances, I am very, very bad with uncertainty. So it's not like it's dispositional and applies to everything. It's like in certain contexts, I feel very, very comfortable with uncertainty going into it. Playing music on stage, running a design thinking session, right? That kind of thing. Or even cooking. Like when I cook, I don't use recipes. I'm just like, whoop, 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 whoop. And sometimes it comes out bad, but sometimes it comes out great too. So those things. But then there are other things where I don't like uncertainty as well too. I think the difference is though that because I have some of those experiences where you necessarily have to confront and embrace uncertainty, I can do it if it's needed. You know what I mean? And I have that component to my brain. You know what I mean? I'm not just spreadsheets and certainty and process and whatever it might be, or recipes. I'm not only that. I can do both. And I think again, that's what I think a lot of, why bring design thinking into a large organization? It's like, yeah, we got to exercise people's minds in different ways. And there's different parts of their brain that need to be activated.
Yeah.
But isn't so it's contextual, but would you also say that for people who are kind of, they don't have that certainty or they don't feel that comfortable in ambiguity or uncertainty, isn't it also that simply they're not, let's say they're not wired that way. Their brain is not wired that way because they haven't been exposed to that. They haven't been taught. They haven't practiced it. So it's also basically a way their brain is wired. So it's not only sort of its behavior, and you can look at it like, oh, whatever. So, but it's also not something they can really fix really quickly, right?
No.
They have
Yeah.
to kind of practice that,
It's practice. I mean,
right?
you've taught design thinking for a very long time.
Hmm.
It's a skill that you can learn and a behavior that you can adopt, but it's not going to come from a lunch and learn in 45 minutes, right? Yeah. Check.
If
We have
only.
design thinking in our organization now. We did the lunch and learn, right? No, it's
Yeah.
like this. It's a muscle. It needs to be trained. And some people may not. There is a little bit of nature versus nurture question there.
Hmm.
Is it actually a neural reality in their brains? There might be some truth to that as well too. But even if you are wired that way, you can still practice and exercise different muscles, right?
Hmm.
So they might not be out there kind of like I am or we are in terms of
Yeah.
let's jump into it. They may never get to that stage, but I think they can appreciate it and experience it and learn it to some degree. And I think it's that kind of
Yeah.
combination and exploration of different mindsets that's important.
Yeah, it's a good point, though. I mean, another topic that we've been exploring with, quite a few of our guests is, the neurodiversity, the diversity. So, for instance, I have dyslexia, and probably, a few other things that they haven't haven't given me a label for yet. But that made me sort of made it more difficult for me to fit into the system that they provided to me. So the school system, I just couldn't really work with the system they gave me.
Mhm.
And so I was a little bit of an outlier anyway. So
Yeah.
so being comfortable, I had to accept that, and I had to be comfortable with just being slightly different. It also meant that I am a school dropout.
Mhm.
So if you look at, is it something you're born with, right?
Mhm.
Or is it something that is because of the context? And I think both, obviously,
Hmm.
because it's about, how did you grow up? Who were your parents? What were your
Mhm.
examples?
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
are the things that you kind of experience throughout life? Of course, they shape you.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to sort of also that what we've been noticing that a lot of creatives and I work a long time ago I worked as a creative director at a design firm, and I had a design team and graphic designers and art directors and those people, and most of them had like something like dyslexia or
Mhm.
ADHD or something. So so to me,
Yeah.
yeah, sort of dyslexia was always a sign of, oh, you must be creative then, because so there is
Yeah.
some truth to it.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but it's interesting because you mentioned the system, right? Like the education system and standardized tests. We love standardized tests here in America, and that, doesn't match with a lot of neurodiverse
right.
mindsets, right?
Mm.
I would argue the same thing in business context. And for me, the system of business is very documentation, process oriented. It's very, what is that? Left brain, I guess, whatever the
Yeah,
characterization that
correct. Yeah.
is, right? And then you have people who on the fringes who fail in that system, who are creative or, this other mindset. And I think, for me, like bringing design thinking in as a consistent, repeatable way to train that part of your brain and bring creativity into the business mindset, for me, it's really just a drop in the bucket compared to the other mindsets that are expected of you in a normal business context. But I think it's more important than ever in today's world because you're very rarely are you going to out execute your competitors these days. Like, what's your strategy? We're going to execute better than our competitors. No. You have to outthink your competitors, and you need to more and more imagination and creativity on the table, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what, I guess all three of us have been doing in our careers is kind of fighting against that system that's so monolithic and it's so ingrained in MBA schools and the whole thing and the expectations of being professional. What even just what does it mean to be professional? It's like it's a different system, and I think that system is sabotaging itself by not embracing what we were talking about earlier. and bringing in this, how do you deal with uncertainty, creativity, all of those things, right? Which, if you dumb it down, it's left brain and right brain, right? But I don't know if that's actually true, but just to dumb it down, right?
Hmm.
And I think business needs more right brain thinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so, there's so much going on in my head. Well, it's like, yeah, because yeah, it's this, are we, because I'm thinking, are we fighting it? Yeah, it feels like it. We're
Mm,
fighting these big systems
yeah.
but at the same time, if you look at, research about, people, the happiness amongst, employees, and
Hmm.
most people are unhappy in those systems as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
we might think we're fighting it, but I think, we're not alone.
yeah.
So, I think most people really don't like it, except that we don't know how to fight it. And
Yeah.
shouldn't we just not fight it, but create an alternative?
Mhm.
That's the
Yeah,
age-old question. Yeah.
I think so. I think so. It's not necessarily about it, and that's good. I mean, it's good. And sometimes I'm envious of people that that can think very linearly and
Mm,
spreadsheets and steps, and here's the playbook, and you turn the page, and that type of thing. I'm envious of that sometimes
yeah.
because I do think it's needed. I just think the balance. I think we need more balance. Let's just put it that way. I'm not
Hmm.
saying it's one or the other. It's just more balance. And I truly believe, particularly in commercial organizations, that the future success is going to depend more on how well you can do right brain kind of stuff as an organization or teams or even individuals as well too. So for me, it's mostly about balance, I think.
Yeah. And I've been thinking a lot lately about the future and
Mhm.
and for better or for worse, but then of course about AI, and
Yeah.
what can I offer that AI can't? And
Mhm.
honestly, there's not a
Yeah.
lot, but I know that I can
Yeah.
be a better human
Yes.
than AI can ever be. So I was
That's
thinking
right.
like, what does it mean? How can I improve
Yeah.
being human?
That's right.
Because that's going to be the thing that sets me apart.
Yeah. No, I,
Yeah.
I agree with that. And as you may remember, Arna, before the pandemic, Mural's mission centered around what we were calling imagination work. And we had this idea of imagination workers,
Mhm.
right? So I've been looking into imagination from different angles and even reading about the science and history of imagination. And I've written several times about AI, even before ChatGPT came out, like, 5 years ago, last time we talked, Arna, years and years ago, I've been writing about, if AI and computers and technology can do all of the process and the heavy lifting, as we say, what's the role of humans in the future of work? And I believe what we bring to the table is our ability to express and apply imagination to business problems. And, there are people like, what's his name? Yuri, who wrote the book called Sapiens? I forget
I,
his name.
I can
Yuri,
see it in my head. I cannot pronounce it.
Yuri Haval. I'm saying his name wrong. You
Well,
Yuval Harari, I think it
Ferrari.
is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. He talks about the difference between
yeah.
Neanderthals and Homo sapiens was the Homo sapiens' ability to tell stories, which and he mentions this as well too, is rooted in imagination, right? Because if you're telling stories, right, you have to bring your imagination to the table. So it basically boils down that even like in terms of evolution, right, the difference that human Homo sapiens bring to the table is our ability to imagine things,
I'm,
right?
I'm
Mm.
reading I'm reading a book called Being You by,
Uh-huh.
again, I won't pronounce his name correctly, but Anil Seth, so Anil Seth with Seth. It's called Being You. It's a new science of consciousness.
Mm.
It's a really interesting read because I cannot claim that I understand everything he says. It's very scientific, and a lot of them are like, "What is he talking about?" But but he writes really well in the sense that he also talks about the sort of what does it what's the outcome of this thinking, or what is it, how do we notice this in our lives. But the main thing that I'm taking away from this is that, so his sort of philosophy of theory, which is, I mean, researched very deeply, is that we are, we are what we are made of. And that creates our reality. That's because our brain basically is in this dark room and it uses these senses to get kind of input. And then it starts predicting, telling stories, basically. Right. So it tells a story, like it's a prediction. This is going to happen and how to survive in this world. But it's created through what we are made of. Now, AI, however smart it's going to be, is not going to be made of the same stuff as we are. So it's never going to be the same.
That's right.
It might be really smart and et cetera, but it's not going to be us. And the other thing that I think is really, to me at least, really, I mean, Morgan, you say I have nothing to offer. But the point that, you are a human being with friends, with things that are not going well, things that are going well, with parents, with family. You traveled, you lived in the US, you lived in the Netherlands, you went through I will never have that. They won't have those stories. They might be able to replicate those stories, but they're boring because they're not true. They're totally boring. Like the art it produces, it's nice when you go like, wow, it can paint a picture, and then you go like, how can that ever be more interesting than a Van Gogh who was who had all these problems and wrote letters to his brother and lived in, it's never going to be a real story. So to us, maybe AI is, maybe we get to a point that AI is really into the art that other AI is creating or something that they like, amongst themselves. But for us, I think it's going to be really interesting to sort of look at the counter movement that's going to happen, where we go like, I don't care. I don't care about AI art. I don't care about AI stories. I care about human stories. So I think that's so I'm not really worried about it. I'm really interested in it. I'm more worried about what bad people will do with technology.
Of course, yeah.
No, I definitely agree there. And I could imagine, perhaps people have already done this, programmed AI to improvise jazz music, right? I haven't heard it yet, but it's imaginable that AI, you could give it a set of rules and it'll improvise jazz music. My hunch is it's not very good.
Yeah, it's not very good, and I don't care. I don't care. I don't care about it. I mean, even if it's wonderful, I don't care about it.
Yeah. In fact, I'll go one step further there. I'm just trying to one up you the whole time here, Arna, but I'll go one step further. There are jazz musicians and jazz recordings that I like, and it's improvised music as well too. That has nothing to do with seeing live jazz. And a lot of people that I talk to are like, yeah, I don't like jazz. And I'm like, did you ever see it live? And they're like, no. Go see jazz live. It is completely different experience because there's a human being on stage and they're struggling and making all weird faces. People in jazz make weird faces when they play music. That's a difference between jazz and classical player. You never see a classical player going like this and grunting and stuff like that. But it's the grunting and the mistakes. If a jazz musician makes a mistake on stage, they just run with it,
but it's
and
such
all
a good
that
point.
stuff.
That's such a good point. But even with an orchestra, the amazement of that, all those people together, they made this thing, and you can look at it, and there's people writing reviews on that because this wasn't, it was better last year, or this conductor isn't, because it's this tension between, can they pull it off? Is it going to be amazing, or is it going to be, so it's that tension, and there's no tension with AI. No. I mean, the art of art and design and creativity is making mistakes. First of all, I mean, your best. I mean, so a lot of the jazz inventions, sort of, the innovative jazz players, they try stuff. And they'll make mistakes, and they go like, "Wow, this is cool." A lot of music, by the way, a lot of songs are written where a guitar player goes like, "Oh, I made a mistake." Well,
right. Oh, that sounds good. Right. Yeah.
Most famous guitar licks were invented by accident, like most innovation. And then we're linking back to business again. I mean, innovation doesn't happen on purpose. It doesn't happen because you now is the good time to come up with an
Right.
innovation. Let's go and do it.
That's right.
Have a few of me for have a few innovations tomorrow. No, it
Right.
doesn't.
Yeah.
You need
Yeah.
improv. You need
Yeah.
improv people who go like, okay,
Yeah.
well, let's just let's mess it
Yeah.
up a little bit and try it out,
Yeah.
and then it emerges. So because structure starts from chaos. And this is
Right.
Yeah.
improv, right? It
Yeah.
starts from
Totally.
improv, and then you recognize something, and you go like, "That's a
Yeah.
really
That's
cool,"
that's right. That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And you start talking to each other with your instrument. You're like,
Absolutely.
this is
Yep.
really cool.
So
It builds just
Jamming.
yeah.
do we ever think classical music was at an improv state before they made it all classical and rule based?
That's a good question. There are examples of it throughout history even. But something like Gregorian chant or medieval classical music, that was all composed and written and would be performed, different depending on the church that they were in or the number of people singing or playing or whatever. So there were differences in performance, but it was basically the same music. There are examples of improvised music in classical, but the balance is certainly more of
Yeah.
composed, written down, linear.
Yeah,
It's
but
linear.
when they
Yeah.
were coming up with the tunes,
I
the
have
people who were
Yeah.
trying to kind of figure out what the
Right.
next,
I
they were
have this
going like,
image of
Yeah.
no, no,
yeah, I have an image of
Right.
like a bunch of Gregorian monks just like jamming together in some
yeah.
dark cellar.
It must have happened the
Yeah.
first time they came up
Yeah.
with a new
Yeah.
tune. They must have
Yeah.
someone must have gone like, no, 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 I didn't like that. Let's
That I
try
didn't like
this.
that. I
Yeah.
agree. Right. Yeah. And then it was, I mean, originally before stuff was even notated, and music notation is a whole field of study, how it evolved too. But there was a lot of oral history, and there still are a lot of cultures where music is just oral history, right? It's not even
Yeah.
written down. African drumming, Asian, Japanese flute
Mhm.
music and stuff like that. There's notation for a lot of that stuff too, but a lot of it is just more of an oral tradition. And to your point, Arna, yeah, it was somebody playing, flute, and oh, I like that, and then they would repeat it so that they learned it, and then pass that on to others through a more oral tradition, right? Which has a certain nonlinearity to it as well too, because there's more room for interpretation and things like that. But yeah, it's just listening to myself talk there is this linear versus nonlinear. Maybe that's a better way than to talk about things rather than left brain and right brain. It's
Yeah.
more about linear and nonlinear types
Well,
of.
and I think in my mind, it always I kind of think about chaos and order, chaos
Okay,
and
yeah.
structure. So,
Similar. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
yeah.
because if you need to create sort of this chaos and to see what emerges,
That's
and
right.
then you can like, how are we going to structure this? This is nice.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's this approach, and I think
Yeah.
nowadays, at least if I what I'm reading and seeing kind of seeing on LinkedIn and social media, thinking about, for instance, strategy as an
Hmm.
emergent thing, like not like is not a fixed linear. Because
Right.
when I kind of started kind of being more kind of active in the business world, strategy felt like this, it was a fixed thing. It was
That's
like,
right. Yeah.
and nowadays you can't really have a strategy that is
Yeah.
fixed, because you need to kind of say, well,
Right.
this is where this is a strategy for now, but we're going to
Yeah.
see what happens.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
right. So in a way,
Yeah.
you're kind of thinking of, non-linearity. Isn't that something that, I mean, isn't that just something that businesses really need to start?
I, I, I think so. Now more than ever, I
Yeah.
believe it's this idea of being able to it's actually not, well, again, it's not either or. I think it's the space in almost the middle, like an oxymoron,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
structured chaos, or chaotic structure or something like that. There's this middle oxymoron. So it's not necessarily about being linear or nonlinear. There are places to be, both of those in their more pure sense. But I think there's also a space in the middle where two truths are possible at the same time, right?
Well,
Or
yeah,
multiple truths are
sure.
possible. Is like if you
Mhm.
ask a jazz musician, is this chaotic? They're like, yeah. But if you ask them if they're following structures, there's structures there
Yeah, of
too,
course.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of at the
And there are
same time.
rules and there are rules.
There are definitely rules. But I feel like particularly in business, the balance is off, and I think it's embracing not more nonlinear ways of thinking and approaching problem solving. Right? Creative problem solving. That's been a discipline that's been around for decades.
Yeah.
That should apply to business. And when you talk about strategy, that's a great example, right? First of all, a lot of linear thinking business leaders, the suits that I mentioned earlier, that they believe they can analyze their way into a strategy. Well, let's just look at the data and that'll tell me what my strategy is. And that's almost never the case. You have to bring your imagination and humanity to the table and
Right.
what you're passionate about and all those things and bring that into strategy making. And then what comes out the other side is a plan that we're going to follow for years. Sometimes you're like, what? You came up with a 3-year strategy? It's like, that's definitely going to change along the way, right?
Especially
But so
nowadays.
it's about but strategy can also be directional as well too, right?
Mhm.
There's this notion of emerging strategy, which isn't
Yeah.
necessarily a new concept, by the way. Henry Mintzberg wrote about that a long time ago. He talked about basically different linearities of strategy. Like a strategy can be a plan that you follow exactly, but he talks about umbrella strategies that are kind of guide their boundaries that set a direction, but what happens in
Yeah.
between needs to evolve, right?
Right.
And I think, going back to the opening question about myself, I think I bring to the conversations, I very often bring an alternative way to look at the problems that we're trying to solve as a business, because I'm thinking about all of these other things and not the analysis and the spreadsheets and how, what are we doing next quarter? Is like, well, what can we throw into the mix that makes it more interesting and more human and, those types of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And when you guys are talking about the chaos and the structure, right? I don't know if you have seen the picture or perhaps visited the one sea where it's like really dark blue water that meets up against the light blue water.
Seen that. Yeah.
I
I
don't
think
have that
it's
image in
in
my mind.
Okay, it's really cool, but I mean, as simple as you can imagine, right? There's almost like this line that goes down the middle, and it's dark blue water that meets the
Yeah.
light blue, and I think it's in Scandinavia somewhere.
Uh-huh.
But but it's kind of this transition between two
Yes.
states or two beings and to
Yeah.
be able to exist in the middle. And I was kind of thinking of when you first introduced yourself, Jim, that you said, you studied music and now you're
Yeah.
in, kind of this helicopter view of Mural and stuff. How did that transition go for you from like a
Mhm.
personal point of view?
Again, from the inside out, it like my life makes sense and all the choices that I've made, right?
Yeah, backwards
So
always, yeah.
yeah, and you always bring yourselves to the table. So for me, it felt natural and logical to some degree. I only noticed that I was maybe a little bit more different than some of the other business thinkers around me when I bumped up to them. Like in my mind, I was like, "Oh, I understand this," and then, "Oh, wait, I don't understand it like they understand it," right?
Yeah.
But I was very, very often I was the dissenting voice or the alternative voice at the table. And I remember this one time here at Mural where we were kind of voting or going around, like, "What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?" And I was on Zoom because we're a completely remote company, and I was distracted or multitasking as we do, right? And then and they said, "Jim, what's your position? Are you for or against this?" Everybody's for this. And I said, without even knowing, because I lost track of what they were talking about, I said, I'm against it. I don't know what you guys were talking about, but if you all agree with it, I'm against it. Like, there's a specific example where I gave my answer before knowing what I was actually saying, only because everybody else agreed. So I think what that meant for me was, again, in my mind, it made sense. But then when I sit down at the table with others, I often get like weird looks. Like, what are you talking about, man? Well,
Yeah.
what's it? Customer needs stuff or whatever I was bringing to the table. So it seemed contrary, and that's what I'm saying. I think it's about balance. That the typical system of organizations is very linear, right? Right, and which makes sense.
Hmm.
Particularly if you're publicly traded, right? Those types of organizations don't like uncertainty.
Hmm.
How
Hmm.
much are you going to make next quarter? How much are my stock options going to grow next quarter? How many more units are we going to ship next year, right? Business
Mhm.
likes certainty, right? And
Yeah,
I think that's to some degree to its own detriment,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
very
That
much.
degree of we have to be certain about everything. It's like, yeah, that's good, right? Reporting to stockholders and things like that, or whatever you're trying to get done. But you're really not going to survive in a global dynamic marketplace like we have now, where two guys sitting around a breakfast table with a credit card can launch a business.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
exactly.
Plug a
Yeah,
bunch of services together. Oh,
yeah.
and shipping is taken care of too. And manufacturing is like, here's the business, right? It's like, wow, I think you got to outwit and outthink your competitors, or get closer to customers. All those things those aren't nice to haves. In my helicopter view, when I'm helicoptering around to all my organizations, I still see the dominant mode of solving business problems is very, very linear.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I see the same, but I also see the struggle. And if you look ahead a little bit, it's going to get worse for
Yep.
Yeah.
them because, to your point, two
Yeah.
guys with a credit card, and oh, there's a competitor. Where did that come
Right.
from?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And they only have two people working there.
Right. Exactly.
And we
Yeah.
have 2,000 or
2000. Yeah.
20,000
Right. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
500,000 people working there,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
is that I think we are in a transition.
Yeah. I agree.
It is something that I find it fascinating as well. We have all these blindnesses and we have this kind of change blindness, right? So if
Yeah.
things
Mhm.
change slowly enough, we don't see it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't see you don't see
That's right.
a plant grow, right? You
That's right.
don't see things, and even if things are way faster when they're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
slow
Yeah.
enough, you don't see it. So
Yeah.
the same, you have to really have that helicopter view to go like, okay, what is changing? So
That's right.
you have to take a completely different kind of angle and to look at things to
That's right.
notice
That's
that
right.
actually over time, over the last decades, things
Yep.
have changed dramatically. Right. So if you're still
Yeah.
stuck
Mhm.
in this idea of, what a strategy is, the way people thought about it, 40 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
is really not working anymore for you. And it might look like it's still
I
working
agree.
for you.
Yep.
So it might seem like you're still doing that.
Yep.
But I hear a lot of people with a lot of anxiety in businesses. So there's so much stress and
That's
tension.
right. That's
Mhm.
right.
And I don't think that should be there. I don't think, at least the
Yeah.
clients I work for and the people that are, I see a lot of anxious people, and
That's
and
right.
they have 30-minute back-to-back,
Yep.
Yeah.
meetings, and it is really not okay. So something has to snap.
Yep. Yeah.
There's something going to happen,
Yep.
and it might be maybe a slow process, but I'm thinking that we're kind
Yeah.
of somehow there's going to be something really dramatic happening in
I,
the
I
near.
I agree. I like the characterization of we're in a transitional phase, I
Yeah.
believe, as well too. And I think for me, as nonlinear and linear thinker, that's the exciting part, right? Because I can embrace the uncertainty that a liminal space, provides or has by, inherent in it. And I think a lot of the anxiety is around the uncertainty of moving from the current system, the linear system, to a more blended one or more nonlinear balance. And it's not even a lot of nonlinear thing. It's just like, just add a little more, dude, to your business mix of thinking. Just a little bit more imagination, creativity, and nonlinear thing. It's not like we're saying, you got to go wear turtlenecks and finger paint all day. We're not saying that, it's just add a little bit more, right? So it's not a really big change, but there's uncertainty there. And I think a lot of the anxiety that you described is around the uncertainty of, well, we know how we used to do it,
Yeah.
but how is it going to happen in the morning? And there's a big chance there, there's a big risk there. And there's real pressure, though, financial pressure, career pressure, personal pressure. There's a lot
Yeah,
of pressures
exactly.
Mhm.
that come with
Exactly.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Do you have
But
any, or I was going to ask you, do you have any tips for somebody who wants to become more comfortable with uncertainty?
Yeah. Go see jazz improvisation, go take a finger painting class, or bring the arts into your life and bring creative processes in your life. Hire a design thinking facilitator to run a strategic session like you've never done a strategic session before, right? And you get those experiences, because I think, and you guys know this as well too, that there are rules and guidelines. Like when we say, hey, we're gonna brainstorm, just to pick on, poor old brainstorming, but it's not, it's not, hey, here's a whiteboard. What do you guys want to do? I don't know what we do with a whiteboard. There, you know what I mean? It's about having faith in the system. You don't know the answer, but you know how to get there. And it's about having faith in the system. I think you have to experience that yourself, right? To be able to say, oh, that's okay to go into something without the answers or data or, the things that, again, I keep picking on this typical business mind, but those are like crutches and things that keep you afloat, right? And it's like, no, just let go. Just this idea of free floating is very uncomfortable. Experience it. Because we could talk, like people are listening to this podcast. Hopefully people are listening to this podcast, right? And we're describing this, and maybe you're going, yeah, okay, I'd love to be more nonlinear, but you got to experience it, right? And that's why I think, this exposure in multiple ways, not just the design. You can't just do it. And I made a joke about that. Hey, we did a brown bag lunch on design thinking. No. It's something you have to practice. We were talking about that practice, right? Exactly. So get exposure to it multiple times, doing it even. Like making something or doing something that is nonlinear, and do that over and over again. That would be the thing that I would recommend somebody do.
Yeah. It's difficult though to have people practice, maybe because before you've practiced it, you don't know what it's going to do to you. So you have no clue what it brings you, because you can't imagine it. So you go like, why would I practice this? Because this vague kind of fluffy, fuzzy thing, where we go, no, really, because once you were on the other, the other side, you're like, this is,
that's right.
But you can't imagine it. So maybe that's why they're resisting often. They go like, no, just give me a 2-day course, or just tell me about it over lunch.
And I wonder how much of, if your manager has, okay, the whole department must do this thing. It's that external pressure. It's not coming from a place of yourself wanting to grow in that area. And I was just talking with a coach yesterday about like changing patterns of behavior, because there's a pattern that I'm trying to change for myself. And she goes, everything comes down to survival. As humans, we are hardwired to survive. So at some point, this pattern that you have helped you survive. And of course, now you're seeing that there's a new pattern you want to go for. And so she goes, but if you tell your system, hey, old pattern is bad, completely jump to the new system, it's too big and overwhelming and scary.
Correct.
So you have to break it down. And like you said, Arne, kind of ask yourself, what is it that I'm hoping to get from this? And then bargain with yourself and your own system saying, hey, could I try this system for 3 days? Okay, sure. And then you can have various systems to choose from. And that was a new way of thinking about it, even for myself. Like, okay, well, so maybe also.
No, I agree. And, I kind of picked on brainstorming. I don't know what your guys' take is on, brainstorming. It works. It doesn't work.
Fair game to pick on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Or workshops even now, reading some of the linear business thinking. Oh, workshops don't work. And I'm like, because your expectation is they give you the answer. Right. Yeah. And it's all about the destination. But if you're working in an organization with more than 2 people and you're trying to foster a new habit, right? You do that through experiences, that there's another effect of brainstorming, which isn't, hey, I got the answer. Okay, all good. It's no, we've also practiced thinking about problems in a different way. Right. And I say we intentionally because, there's personal behaviors that you want to change, like you just described, Morgan, as well, too. But again, once you get in an organization, there are teams and departments and things like that have kind of their own persona and their own creativity across people. And for me, I get the critiques of brainstorming sessions, but there's still this very, very real human experience of being like in a jam session. Like we don't know the answer, but we know how to get there. And that's practicing that muscle. And it's also practicing customer centricity and other things as well, too, which are, for me, are important, almost not more important as the answer, but those are very important factors of workshops and brainstorming sessions that people pick on a lot.
Yeah, and it's the sort of sharing with your colleagues
Yeah.
and talking on a different kind of in different way, and instead of sending each other emails or
Right.
messages or
Right.
spreadsheets, you are vulnerable and you are
That's right.
right. So it's a very different
Totally
way
agree.
of behavior.
Yeah.
That's one thing that is kind of something. It's often difficult to explain to people when we say, so for instance, you have a tool, the journey map, customer journey map. Okay.
Mhm.
The mapping, the
Yeah.
activity of the
Yeah. Totally.
mapping is more important
I
than the end
agree. Yeah.
Yes.
result.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's actually because you have to think and you have to talk and you have to
Totally.
do this with your colleagues.
Totally.
And so talking about AI, by the way, taking things over.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
for instance,
Right. Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
creating personas, that makes no sense
Yeah.
because
Right.
it's
I
about
agree.
the
Yeah.
creation of
That's
the
right.
persona.
That's right.
And
That's
we're
right.
back to art again because it's actually the making, the pain it
That's
takes to
right.
write a book,
That's right.
the
That's right.
struggle it takes to
The
to
stupid
create
faces
this
the
music,
improv musicians
the
make.
improv,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the point. And
That's right.
so,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are missing the point.
That's right.
Yeah.
I agree. The journey is part of the destination, or the journey is the
Oh,
destination.
it is, yeah,
I believe very much so. I'm glad you brought up journey mapping. That's a topic near and dear to my
I
heart
know, yeah,
with the book. And in the second edition, I actually beefed up quite a bit sections around teamwork, team unity, alignment. The alignment. In fact, in the chapter one, I call these alignment diagrams, right? And it's, oh, we want to align to the customer, but we also want to align everybody else,
exactly,
right?
yeah.
And here's what you can't do is, hey, I did some research. I sent around an email and then I say, hey, Morgan, did you see the pie chart on slide 3? As a Slack message. That it's
Mhm.
like, no, there's no sense making, collective sense making from that. It's let's take, I don't want to, pie charts are good, right? But let's take the journey map and workshop it together. And so we all internalize that. I think there's a huge effect that has on an organization's ability to innovate, to advance work, right? Or just even to just reach their goals,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we can bash, brainstorming or journey mapping workshops or even design thinking, which gets bashed a little bit.
Mhm.
But I do believe there is a lot of the things that we were talking about here, the creativity, the nonlinear thinking, the imagination, and that has to be practiced. I think we
Yes. Yeah.
can't lose, we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Yeah. And I think these things that you're talking about, right? Brainstorming, workshops,
Yeah.
design thinking, there are these really rich and valuable things that have proven their worth and their rewards, and they've become kind of, excuse my language, bastardized to be a quick
Yeah.
export. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, what we're making
Right.
fun of, right? The
Yes.
export version of
Correct.
brainstorming, the
Yes.
export version of
Right.
workshops.
the
Yeah.
the lunch and learn check. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
but that's a very linear thinking. Oh, we need design thinking. Let's schedule some lunch and learns, and then on a spreadsheet you go check. That is yeah. That's the thing we're making fun of here. What I like to when I run workshops and more of these. I guess they call them fuzzy, but non-linear types of activities.
Mhm.
I'll often they'll say, "Hey, what are the results of your, what was the NPS of participants, and how do you measure the results of this?" And I said, "Well, can you imagine an organization that doesn't do any of that, that just operates on spreadsheets, bottom lines? Can you imagine an organization that doesn't do anything to bring people together as humans, as teams? It doesn't do anything to explore their space creatively?" It's like, wow, that's probably not an advanced organization that's competitive, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, so the opposite of not doing those things is also not a good thing either. Therefore, they must bring something, even if it's intangible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look at the future, what is the thing for yourself? What are you looking forward to?
What am I personally looking to
Yeah.
do, or
What are you looking forward to? What is the thing
what
that
am
you
I
are?
looking forward
Oh,
to? Yeah, what am I looking forward to? That's interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to education and instruction and enablement of others, because I kind of feel like I have enough battle scars now, and a couple books behind me that have gotten beaten up and those things, that I feel like I can send the elevator down and pick up other people and help people learn from my mistakes as well too. So for me, it's I look forward. I got a gray beard here too. I look forward to yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I look forward to helping others kind of see through the transition period that we're in whatever aspect that is, at their personal level. I like to talk a lot about collaboration. I like to talk about customer centricity and journey mapping and jobs to be done, and just being able to impart that on other folks is something I look forward to. I find that very rewarding.
Yeah, I can imagine that. It's isn't that the Maslow pyramid?
Oh yeah,
That
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you're at the top? No.
yeah, yeah. I wouldn't
Oh,
say that. I would never say that. That sounds too arrogant. I'm at the top.
You're at the
Although I
top.
did say send the elevator down.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, you have the beard and you're like, yes. It's so funny. But it is
yeah,
true. I think at one point in your career, you can kind of you can guide and teach and coach
yeah,
others.
yeah,
And in my experience, there's nothing more valuable than that. There's nothing more amazing to actually
yeah.
not. So it's really interesting, I want to say, to work with large organizations because it's fascinating and it's interesting,
Mm,
and I kind of
Mhm.
I like to be a little bit on the outside, but looking into the kitchen every now and then is really
yeah.
cool. But it can also be frustrating because these big systems, they don't change that quickly, and then there's a new CEO and there's a new
Mhm.
whatever, and there you go. But people, if you teach people, if you coach people, right, you have impact, and
Yeah.
and it's so
Yeah.
rewarding.
Yep. Agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So
We're
well,
of a similar mindset there, Arna. Yeah.
yeah. I was, yeah, that I was thinking anyway. So because of
Yeah.
the music and our sort of a lot of shared interests, that is so fascinating. Again, we in this podcast we talk to so many people, and there's so many, I want to say people like us. Fighting the
Yeah.
system,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's actually so many people fighting the system. I think we should have won by now. But anyway, but
Well,
some,
that's what I'm saying. The system is very, very large and monolithic and
Yeah.
calcified, right? And it gets reinforced, at MBA school, or I'm just picking on
Mhm.
MBA schools like I was picking on brainstorming, but there are a lot of mechanisms that calcify that. And I've seen it happen too, even at the individual level, where people move into like a more management role, like an individual contributor
Mhm.
that was creative and more freeform, and then they move into a management role, and it's like, oh, now I'm expected to be more managery,
Yeah.
and then they assume that persona. So there are even, kind of more ad hoc motions and
right.
tendencies that gravitate to calcify that system even further. And so it's still really big and dominant out there, Arna, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we keep on fighting the windmills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to some degree. To
I
some
think I
degree.
think we're
Yeah.
starting to see the cracks in things though.
Yeah.
And I mean, because I haven't been in the game as long as you guys, and so that's been a frustration point for me sometimes, right? Like I look
You'll
or
get there. Well,
but I have this probably definitely false vision of what it must have been like for you guys, or general, and be like, oh well, it was more systematic. You could just do this and do that and you would have success. And now, right,
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
topsy-turvy for me.
Yeah.
But I think that's also one of the things I'm looking forward to, although it will be incredibly intense, is the impending demise of some
Yeah.
really big things and what grows from that. So I
Yeah.
definitely
yeah.
think we need
Yeah.
teachers
Yeah.
who have
Hopefully.
uncertainty. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that'll happen, but it is like a generational type of a thing, you know.
Mhm.
Interesting thing though for me is, you know, I do try to read a lot of business stuff in literature. Peter Drucker,
Mm.
I
Mhm.
mentioned Henry Mintzberg before, and you know, speaking of Henry Mintzberg, you know, he wrote Strategy Safari, which is one of the
Ah, yeah.
big strategy books out there. He's got a great blog too, by the way, if you follow him.
Oh, no.
Harvard business. I don't know where he taught, but you know, I'm a business professor and stuff like that. But you know, like decades ago, he said something like, you know, MBA schools aren't necessarily bad. It's just that the wrong people go to the programs for the wrong reasons at the wrong time. Otherwise, it's fine. So there, you know, I think even from that, you know, from that more linear thinking
Sure.
crowd, there's been a realization of this as well too. So we're not alone as just this weird, you know, fringe festival kind of creatives in their turtlenecks. Is that, and if you go back and read Peter Drucker, like you read Peter Drucker and you're like, holy
Yeah.
cow, this guy was the most customer centric person ever. What
Yeah.
happened in between? So there is this
Yeah.
Borg or whatever that has its own life. But I think there are these cracks and nibbling at the edges, and it will take new generations to kind of overcome that. And then, you know, the work of Frederick Laloux. Do you know his book Reinventing Organizations?
No.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with that, Arna?
No, I don't. I'm
Highly recommend
hang
Frederick
on.
Laloux.
La Louise at L
Lalaux. I believe he's from Belgium. Laloux, reinventing organizations. Great,
Mm.
great insights and theories, but he looks at different articulations of different consciousness over like centuries, like the Renaissance, you know, and then
Mhm.
the industrial era.
Oh,
And
that's
he says
interesting.
at each one of those articulation points over history, there's a different sensibility around what an organization is. So he kind of tracks how organizations have changed over time as well too. And he has this scale from red, yellow, orange, green, and then teal. He has this notion of a teal organization, which is basically a self-organized and a
Right.
self-managed
Yeah,
organization.
I know that.
And he
Yeah.
points to many examples in the book. And he just like we mentioned before, we're in a transition period, and he believes that this new type of organization will emerge, right?
Yeah.
And it will
Mhm.
be one that is more self-directed, empowered, self-managing, like completely self-managing, like almost no hierarchy, right? And we hear about this with holacracies and things like that. But
Yeah.
he's got some real business cases where that actually proved to be profitable as well, too. So
Yeah.
good for
Oh, that's yeah.
society and good for business and good for the employees, right? A triple
Yeah.
bottom line win there as
Yeah.
well, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
yeah, check out
interesting.
Frederick Laloux's
I
work. He's
will.
been very influential on my thinking around businesses. And we're stuck in kind of the orange world, maybe a little bit of green. But when you say, you know, what do I look forward to? I look forward to the day where there's a different kind of organization. And by that, I mean the assumption of an organization, right? You go into an
Yes.
organization now is who's my manager? Who's the CEO? Strategy comes down from top, blah, blah, blah. All of those assumptions kind of go away. And that I guess my point there is that takes generations to get to that new state of what is a profitable business organization. I think that's going to evolve with a lot of the concepts that we were talking about are behind that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
agree. I agree.
I wonder if they're still going to be called organizations.
Yeah,
Because if we
right.
just
Yeah,
started calling them something new, we would
right. Yeah.
give ourselves a
Well,
fresh
we call
slate.
them enterprises now, corporations, you know, and maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll be
No.
a business collective around a given topic
Yeah.
where
Hmm.
it's a lot more loose and a lot more freelance
We are.
based and a lot more self-organized. And we call them, I don't know, let's come up
We.
with a name now. You guys
Yeah.
want to coin a term on the
Organisms.
podcast?
Organisms.
Organisms, yes. Actually, he uses the metaphor of an organism.
Cool.
Uh, and he also uses the word family, which I don't quite like, but it's more of an organism, right?
Yeah.
I
Self
use ecosystem.
Oh,
ecosystem, yeah.
ecosystems, also a good one.
Ecosystems and organisms, yeah, right.
It's what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Yeah,
So I'm.
that's what you do, yeah. And
Yeah.
and you're not in a market; you're in an arena,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Exactly.
so you're an ecosystem based organism in an
Yeah.
arena,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
not a corporation in an industry, you know, right?
Yeah, and we don't sort of which is I think it's Charles Leadbeater who wrote some books way back, and he talked about something that gave me the language for what I was already doing. He talked about the difference between the McDonald's model or the Chinese restaurants model.
Uh-huh.
So, because the one scales and the other spreads.
Hmm.
And the one is different in every location because
Right.
it's local, but it's still a Chinese restaurant, whether
Right.
you are
Yep.
in whatever Canada or
Yep.
South Africa or France,
Yep.
but it is
Mhm.
different in every location and it's still recognizable. It's the
Yeah.
same. And whereas a McDonald's restaurant is the same everywhere.
Right.
Mhm.
They're
Literally.
changing a little bit every now and then, but they're literally the same. So I really like the model where you when you talk about scaling, you talk about spreading, you talk about,
Yeah.
if people can join. And it's an
Yeah.
ecosystem, and an ecosystem needs to be in balance and needs to be alive.
Yeah.
And so you think about it very differently. I totally believe that that is a future, maybe not the future of all business, but it's
Right.
a future for business for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree
And if you think
wholeheartedly.
about it, if you think about it, if you look at any organization out there, it really is a community of people working together, and it's a whole bunch of emotions,
Yeah,
an
that's right.
emotional
Mhm.
That's right.
cluster,
Yep.
right? And it really is already an ecosystem, except
It
that it's
already is. Yeah.
Yeah,
often
Yeah.
somewhat
absolutely.
dysfunctional
Yeah.
because
That's
it
right.
is killing itself and it's killing its
I,
environment. So it's an
I agree.
ecosystem
Yeah.
which becomes a
Mhm.
disease, if you think about it.
Yep.
I think, and I believe totally that we are part of nature and we adhere to natural laws,
That's right.
Mhm.
Yep.
right? So
Mhm.
Yep.
and we sometimes
Yeah.
think we don't, but we
Yeah.
do. And so I think we're learning from nature. I think that's the way.
Yeah. No, I agree. In fact, I was speaking with a customer yesterday about collaboration here at Mural. We kind of, talk about collaboration, and we're kind of looking at what I call the in-between spaces,
Right.
the invisible, adaptable, flexible space of an organization, right? You have strategy and operations and org charts, right? And org charts, but that's not how work happens. That's not how progress
Yeah.
actually happens. And
No.
he was showing me his org chart. It was more of an org diagram. It wasn't like people, it was departments and things and how they fit together. And I forget how we got on the subject, but oh, there were these kind of satellite teams that are like catalysts that go around to each one of these big bubbles. He had four big bubbles on the diagram. There's this catalyst organization. And he said, yeah, right now, those catalyst organizations really function on who you know inside the big bubble, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, where's that on your chart? If that's how work really happens,
Mhm.
right? It's the more network, organic, human side of it. It's like that's not in the chart. So how are you managing how work actually happens? And how are you being sorry, it wasn't about managing, it was about being intentional. How are you intentional about all of that in between spaces that fills in all of your bubbles and the personal connection and all these things that he was mentioning? He goes, well, we don't. It just happens,
Yeah.
right? In an organization. And
Exactly.
I think to be honest with you, just to get even more concrete, I think that's what's driving a lot of the return to office policies here in the
Yeah.
US. Amazon said 5 days a week, and other companies are threatening 5 days a week. And I think it's a lack of imagination, again, going back to that word,
Yeah.
of leaders on how we can have a dynamic organism-like network of people that are going towards the same goal together if they're not together.
Right.
And then from that sense, the office is a collaboration tool because,
Mhm.
100 years ago, corporations found out if we put people together, almost like rats in an experiment, if we put people together, they'll talk to each other. So,
Who would have
it's
thought?
not on my org chart, but they'll talk and
Yeah.
do these things like, well, yeah, but you know what? These days we have Slack and Zoom and you can still have that dynamic, squishy middle space of business now, and they don't have to be sitting together. But you need to be intentional about it, though, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So those are the types of things that I like to look at. I forget what brought me to that, but we were asking about what we look forward to in the future. And I would say different types of organizations that aren't just experiments or figments of somebody's imagination, that it's no, that's how business happens, right?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I agree. Thank you so much. We can talk forever, I feel. But
We could, yeah. So when are we going to start the podcast?
Yeah, exactly.
Our first question.
Oh boy, yeah. Thank you so much. So inspirational.
I have so many notes. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's a good thing if people take notes, but I hope the listeners
Definitely, yeah.
will get something out of it. And I hope it was what you were expecting. I know we kind of riffed here. There was a lot of uncertainty going into this. I hope the product
We've learned to not have expectations, and then we're always pleasantly surprised.
Embrace uncertainty.
This is jamming, man. We're just jamming.
Right, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
exactly. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
jamming
sure.
with
My
us.
Thanks
pleasure.
for joining us, Jim. Great to meet you.